Think about your phone right now. How many times today have you picked it up to just do one thing, only to find yourself lost in a scroll, feeding an algorithm that feels designed to keep you hooked? By the end of this video, you won't just recognize how these systems exploit your attention. You will walk away with the philosophical framework necessary to reclaim your self-control and true freedom. Why does so much of the content we consume feel kinda worthless? And why do we make bad people go viral? Take Johnny Somali for example, a streamer who gained notoriety for repeatedly harassing people in Japan and Korea. Although he was arrested multiple times, his views and donations just seemed to skyrocket. Then there's Vitaly, another streamer who faced charges for theft and public harassment in the Philippines. This guy is facing up to 18 months in jail and was even threatened with the death sentence for some time. Why is technology encouraging our lack of self-control in consuming these worthless, harmful things? Perhaps we, like those idiot streamers, are also bad people, but not in the same way. A lot of times, in movies and TV shows, villains are cartoonishly evil. But the truth is, only a tiny majority of truly evil people are actually like that. Most of the time, being a bad person isn't about grand evil, it's just about being a human who can't help but constantly reach for that next dopamine hit. That's why a show like Bojack Horseman nails it. He's impulsive, kind of a dick, and lacks self-control to the point of being self-destructive. But he also has these genuine moments of virtue, caring for his friends, his sister, even strangers. He's not evil, he's just a mess. There's a saying, don't attribute to malice what you can attribute to stupidity. Sometimes our brains are just looking for a button that says, you're happy now. What if I told you that the technologies of today have a goal that's basically turning us all into Bojacks? No, I don't mean a giant horse actor, but into people who are fundamentally not in control of themselves. By the end of this video, I hope you'll have a much clearer understanding of how that's happening, and more importantly, how you can prevent it. But to do that, we're going to dive into a metaphor that's about 2,400 years old. The greatest philosophy is in ordering cities. In perhaps the most famous work in Western philosophy, The Republic, Plato describes his ideal city, the Callipolis. He suggests that the soul and the city are intimately connected. They mirror one another. Plato criticized the media of his time, the tragic plays and comedies, and the epics, for encouraging the Greeks to let their passions run wild. There were tales of the gods being petty, violent, and sleeping around, and stories of heroes doing shameful things. Plato thought these were terrible role models for the people of his ideal city, and that instead of being run by the passions, these strong animalistic feelings, we should let reason take the wheel. In Book 3 of the Republic, he gives us a story, the myth of metals, where some people are guided by reason, and thus have souls of gold, destined to be the leaders of the city. Others are guided by honor. These are the silver souls, the warriors and defenders. And then there's bronze, those who are guided by their appetites. These are the farmers and the craftsmen. For each metal, there's a virtue to pursue. Wisdom for gold, courage for silver, and self-control for bronze. Plato's core point is that society is harmonious only when its people are virtuous. Now we may ask ourselves, does the media of our time encourage us to develop these virtues? Or do they instead incentivize a lack of self-control, the vice that rules the appetites? Plato speaks of the education of silver souls, the defenders of the city. He wanted them to be fearless in the face of death and to have immense self-control. He criticizes Achilles and Odysseus, some of the most famous Greek heroes. Achilles is legendary for his wrath and murder sprees, and Odysseus is known for his pride in lying. Socrates wanted to censor all the examples of these heroes showing a lack of self-control. We can also ask ourselves, how much of this content that we consume is of a good role model? Is it a story worth emulating, or is it just garbage driven by our lowest appetites? And why is our city, our society, shoving that garbage down our throats? In books 8 and 9 of the Republic, Plato ranks democracy at number 4 out of 5 of all government systems. This is because he saw democracy as an anarchy of the passions, where people just let their strongest feelings and impulses rule them. This resonates with a quote from Rousseau: "To be driven by our appetites alone is slavery, while to obey a law that we have imposed on ourselves is freedom." Plato would argue that the only way to be truly free is to impose rules on ourselves that are informed by wisdom. This leads us to a crucial question. We live in a society where a lack of self-control is often marketed as freedom. But could this actually be a form of slavery to our appetites? And if so, who benefits from our ignorance and lack of self-control? I had more technology in my life than ever before, but it felt harder than ever to do the things I actually wanted to do. This is a feeling that is familiar to anyone in our technologic world. We all have goals. Maybe it's to learn guitar, spend more time with family, or take a trip. But think about all these social media companies. What goals do you think they have up on their dashboards during meetings? Probably not help users learn guitar. They're after engagement. You probably don't wake up every day with the goal of being engaged with your phone. There's a deep fundamental misalignment between the goals we have for ourselves and the goals our technologies have for us. James Williams, who won the Founders Award in his time at the Google Ads team, is no stranger to what these companies are after. In his book, Stand Out of Our Light, Williams uses the analogy of a terrible GPS to show us this misalignment. Think about how often you pick up your phone to look something up and end up somewhere completely different, maybe scrolling for minutes before you even remember what you were looking for. Imagine your GPS took you 2 blocks off your destination, or even to a different city. We'd call that garbage technology. That makes sense for technology that guides us in physical space, but in informational space, this happens all the time. Drawing from Huxley's Brave New World, Williams emphasizes that freedom's greatest enemies aren't always the things we fear. It's not the explicit oppression of Orwell's 1984, where Big Brother watches your every move. No, he says it's often the things that give us pleasure. Huxley envisioned a dystopian future where, I quote, people will come to love their oppression, to adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think. It's not about being forced to consume. It's about being so pleasurably distracted that we lose the capacity to think deeply. Williams concludes that the most valuable skill today is quite simply to not be distracted. He writes, "It's my firm conviction, now more than ever, that the degree to which we are able and willing to struggle for ownership of our attention is the degree to which we are free." He also points out that our modern condition is even more confusing because we have loose cultural presets. We're constantly questioning our values, we lack strong traditions, and we have a bewildering array of conflicting role models. Cultural norms have always evolved. But today, with mass media and technology, this flux happens at an insane speed. It creates a vacuum of cultural authority that anyone looking to profit off our attention can exploit. Now, some might naively say, if it's so harmful, just step away from it. But Williams challenges this. He draws from German philosopher Peter Sloterdijk and the ego depletion hypothesis. The idea is that our self-control, our willpower, is finite. If we have to constantly take on this self-regulatory burden, thinking about whether to pick up your phone, whether to check social media, that exhausts us. It drains willpower that could have been spent on other, more meaningful things. And it hits the disadvantaged even harder, as they often start from a place of willpower depletion. So Williams argues that the media companies in this age of attention are essentially training our society to be impulsive and weak-willed. They do this by providing devices that offer an endless supply of informational rewards. He quotes Jeff Hammerbacher, Facebook's very first research scientist, who famously remarked, "The best minds of my generation are thinking about how to make people click ads, and it sucks." I want you to think about how important your attention is, because attention isn't just about what you're doing right now. It's about the way you navigate your whole life. It's about who you are, who you want to be, and the way you want to pursue those things. Reed Hastings, the co-founder of Netflix, once said, "At Netflix, we are competing for our customers' time. So our competitors include Snapchat, YouTube, sleep, etc." Not only is Netflix competing with your sleep, but your brain is getting DDoSed by social media and all technologies of attention. Williams emphasizes that you do pay when you pay attention. You pay with the extra hour of sleep you didn't get because you spent it scrolling. You pay it with the life you might have otherwise lived. And the worst part is, billions of dollars are being spent researching the best ways to get you hooked. Every technology of attention is made with what's called persuasive design. It subtly pushes you to click the right buttons, watch the right videos, and keep you engaged. It exploits things like the fear of missing out, social comparison, status quo bias, and all sorts of psychological triggers that keep you distracted. Williams suggests that we're basically trading our self-control for a chance to play slot machines. Every time we scroll, we're paying, not with money, but with our attention, for the possibility of surprise of a little hit. Yet it's incredibly hard for us to realize how costly it is to spend our attention this way, day after day. Williams' goal is that we should bring these technologies of attention onto our side. He writes that we need to align our goals with our values. As he puts it, it means expecting our technologies to proceed from a place of understanding about our own views of who we are, what we're doing, and where we're going. It means expecting our technologies and their designers to give attention to care about the right things. We find ourselves in a kind of attentional serfdom. We're enslaved to our inferior impulses. For Williams, the solution lies in shifting advertisement away from just capturing attention and towards genuinely advancing our intentions and goals. He believes it's a moral obligation for these tech companies. The default setting for all this technology should be one of having control over one's own attention. But how do we even get here? It wasn't always this difficult to retain your attention, so what actually changed? Imagine you were living back in the day, in a village with, say, 3 books, and you were one of the lucky few who could even read. Then one fateful day, someone brings in a 4th book. You'd probably be pretty damn interested. You wouldn't care if it was a cookbook, a dictionary, you'd at least check it out. That's informational scarcity. But today, the dynamic has completely flipped. In the 1970s, economist Herbert Simon pointed out that when information becomes abundant, attention becomes a scarce resource. Now, you have literally billions of pieces of information and all these platforms vying for your attention. That's attentional scarcity. When information becomes abundant, your attention becomes the scarce resource. This brings us to Neil Postman in his profound book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. He opens with a quote that really sets the stage. Orwell feared those who would deprive us of information. Huxley feared those who would give us so much that we would be reduced to passivity and egoism. Postman wrote this book in the 1980s, a time when Ronald Reagan, a former Hollywood movie actor, was president. Today, our own president also has a background in entertainment, as well as a brash social media presence. This isn't just a coincidence. Postman argues that our culture increasingly rewards people for their ability to amuse and entertain, rather than for their wisdom or actual substance. He famously quipped, "How delighted would be all the kings, tsars, and Führers of the past to know that censorship is not a necessity when all political discourse takes the form of jest." If something isn't immediately entertaining, many people today simply dismiss it as not worth their time. Echoing Marshall McLuhan, Postman analyzes the forms of human conversation. He argues that the medium through which we communicate profoundly shapes what ideas we can conveniently express. And crucially, the ideas that are convenient to express inevitably become the most important content of a culture. For example, trying to communicate a philosophical argument using smoke signals would be impossible. The form simply excludes that kind of content. Postman gives us another big example. William Howard Taft, the 27th president who weighed over 300 pounds. His size might have not been an issue when newspapers and radio were the dominant media, but imagine him trying to win an election in today's visual world of TV and social media. His message would be overshadowed by his image. Postman argued that television actively attacks literate culture. Television and its mega-evolved version in our pockets has redefined public discourse. Its very nature is to suppress complex ideas to accommodate visual interest. He wrote, "No matter what is depicted or from what point of view, the overarching presumption is that it's there for our amusement and pleasure. The media's worth and utility is defined by its ability to captivate." Postman even suggests that today we have a very strange, almost perverse definition of being informed. He uses the term disinformation, not to mean false information, but misleading information, misplaced, irrelevant, fragmented, or superficial. It creates the illusion of knowing something, but actually pulls you further away from true understanding. When news is packaged as entertainment, this is the inevitable result. Postman used the Iran hostage crisis in 1979 as an example. He asked, how many Americans knew what language was spoken in Iran, or what Ayatollah meant, or their political history. Yet everyone had an opinion. The same applies to our current global conflicts. In America, everyone is entitled to an opinion, but often it's more accurate to call these strong emotions or biases rather than well-informed opinions. Perhaps we've become much like the democracy that Plato criticizes. It's this tyranny of the passions disguised as knowledge, when really, it's just ignorance. The impulsive, constantly scrolling slot machine that is social media is pushing us further down the path to becoming Bojacks. People driven by immediate gratification and lacking self-control. It's funny to hear Postman complain about a radio station promising to give you the world in 22 minutes. In our world of TikToks and Reels, focusing for 22 minutes straight would set you apart from 99% of people. This crisis of internal self-rule brings us to the core argument of philosopher Byung-Chul Han's psychopolitics. Han argues that we're living in this bizarre phase of history where our freedom itself is being used to control us. Think about it. 1,000 years ago, if your dad was a carpenter, you probably became a carpenter. You knew your purpose was to make stuff with wood. And sure, it was physically exhausting, but there was a certain simplicity, a quiet purpose. You didn't spend energy agonizing over your life purpose. But today, we view ourselves as projects. We're constantly building, shaping, reinventing ourselves. Society isn't telling you what to do, but it's whispering everything you could do and judging you for what you don't do. But Han says this very sense of agency subtly transforms into a new kind of pressure, a super efficient form of subjugation. The individual, believing they're free, ends up subjugating themselves to internal demands. They are driven by a compulsive need for achievement and optimization. You essentially become your own tyrant. This brings us to Han's concept of the digital panopticon, the all-seeing eye. This builds on Jeremy Bentham's original panopticon design, a prison where inmates are always visible but never know if they're being watched, so they always behave just in case. Han argues that social media operates as a new, more effective version of this, and the ultimate symbol of this is the digital panopticon we each carry in our pockets, our phones. However, our modern digital panopticon is even scarier than Bentham's, because its inmates actively communicate and expose themselves. They post and monitor each other of their own will. We offer our data not because we're forced, but from an inner need to share. This is what makes it so incredibly effective. We found ourselves in what Han calls a transparency society, which fosters total conformity. The constant connectivity has a leveling effect. It's as if everyone is constantly observing everyone else, subtly ensuring alignment with widely accepted norms. This intrinsic self-imposed policing, Han argues, is far more problematic than any overt state surveillance. Our desire to be liked and seen becomes a tool for maintaining systemic control. When we click like, Han suggests, we are, in a sense, bowing down to the order of domination. Han even contends that big data marks the end of genuine free will. Because these systems can analyze our subconscious inclinations, they can predict, calculate, and ultimately control human behavior. Social media isn't controlled by means of brute force. They're just putting out the slot machine, and yet we're all over it. The economy of attention just dangles a carrot on a stick for us, but we can't help but go after it. It doesn't erect obstacles, but rather leads astray by meeting our desires halfway, making control feel like genuine freedom. It knows our buttons and presses them, not through repression, but through seductive engagement. It's like the algorithm knows you're about to think about that random thing you once vaguely considered, and boom, there's an ad for it. Coincidence? Han thinks not. This is a crucial distinction from the more overt dystopia of Orwell's 1984, where Big Brother enforces control through fear and constant visible surveillance. Han's world resonates much more with Huxley's Brave New World, where people willingly embrace their oppression, consuming pleasure and distraction that dulls their capacity for critical thought. A systemic response is necessary for this systemic issue. However, you as an individual can intentionally step away from these technologies and win back your attention. I hope that this video gave you a greater perspective and awareness about all the forces that are competing for your attention, and that you feel empowered to say no to them and reclaim your freedom. This is the freedom of listening to your values and your innermost desires, and not the noise from these technologies that lead you astray. Perhaps you can follow Plato's advice and not listen to the lower parts of your soul that lack self-control, and instead let yourself be ruled by your own wisdom. In this way, you can stand out of your own light, and you will slowly begin to realize what you were meant to do and how you are meant to flourish. If you want to get a deeper understanding of these philosophies, all the books I read for this video are linked in the description. Feel free to check out my other videos on Han, or perhaps the video I made on Guy Debord's Society of the Spectacle. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might benefit from this message. What's one small step you can take today to protect your attention and allow yourself to grow? Let me know in the comments below.